Ethan never believed betrayal would arrive quietly, yet it did, slipping into his life without warning on an ordinary evening. The house was calm, lights low, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Nothing felt wrong until his eyes caught the glow of a tablet left charging on the kitchen counter. A message preview flashed across the screen, brief but heavy, written with ease and familiarity. It wasn't meant for him, and that was clear instantly. The words carried a closeness that didn't belong to friendship, a comfort built over time. In that moment, Ethan felt something inside him break, not loudly, but cleanly, like glass cracking under pressure. He stood frozen, staring at the screen, his mind racing faster than his body could follow. Years of trust rushed back at once. Shared plans, quiet promises, private jokes, all suddenly questioned. He thought of the nights that had ended too late, the excuses that had sounded reasonable at the time, the way distance had slowly replaced warmth. None of it had seemed dangerous until now. The betrayal wasn't dramatic or obvious. It was subtle, patient, and deeply personal, which somehow made it worse. Ethan didn't confront anyone that night. He turned off the tablet, sat on the couch, and let the silence press in around him. His chest felt tight, but his face stayed still. Anger didn't come first. Shock did, then disbelief. He replayed the message in his head, reading it again and again until the meaning fully settled. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice, repeated often enough to feel normal to the person who made it. The one who betrayed him believed they had reasons. In their mind, the relationship had grown cold long before the line was crossed. They told themselves they were unseen, unheard, and justified in seeking comfort elsewhere. It wasn't about cruelty, they claimed. It was about survival. That story made it easier to live with what they'd done, even if guilt still lingered in quiet moments. As the night stretched on, Ethan's thoughts shifted. Pain slowly hardened into focus. He wasn't thinking about forgiveness. He wasn't thinking about repair. He was thinking about balance, about fairness, about how something so carefully hidden could exist while he remained in the dark. The idea that the truth could sit comfortably with the person who caused it filled him with a cold resolve. Morning came too soon. Ethan moved through the house as if nothing had changed. He spoke when spoken to. He smiled when expected. Inside, though, every word felt heavy. Every interaction felt staged. He watched closely, now noticing details he had once ignored. A glance held too long. A phone turned face down. A pause before answering simple questions. Each small thing added weight to what he already knew. At work, Ethan struggled to focus. His mind replayed moments from the past, searching for the exact point where things shifted. He wondered if the betrayal had begun as a harmless conversation, something casual that slowly crossed lines. The thought made his jaw tighten. The idea that trust could erode so quietly made him question his own judgment. Had he been careless, too trusting, or was trust simply a risk no one could fully avoid? He didn't share his discovery with anyone, not friends, not family. Keeping it to himself felt safer. Speaking it aloud would make it real in a way he wasn't ready to face. For now, silence gave him control. It allowed him to observe without being seen, to gather himself before deciding what came next. That evening, Ethan found himself alone again, sitting in the same spot where everything had changed the night before. This time, the shock was gone. In its place was a steady, burning awareness. He wasn't imagining things. He wasn't overreacting. The betrayal was real, and it had already altered the course of his life. He began to think about what revenge might look like, not in a dramatic sense, but in quiet, precise ways. He imagined the truth coming out unexpectedly, the careful image collapsing under its own weight. He imagined the roles reversed, the confusion, the hurt. The idea brought a brief sense of power, one that surprised him with its intensity. But alongside that power came questions. Would it actually make him feel better? Or would it pull him further into something he wouldn't recognize later? Ethan pushed those thoughts aside. It was too early for reflection. Right now, all he knew was that he couldn't let this go unnoticed. The person who betrayed him sensed a shift, even if they didn't understand why. Ethan's calm felt different now, sharper, more distant. Conversations felt shorter. Silences lasted longer. It made them uneasy, but they told themselves they were imagining it. After all, no accusation had been made. No proof had been shown. As long as everything stayed quiet, they believed the past could remain buried. Days passed, each one adding tension. Ethan paid attention to patterns, to timing, to behavior. He didn't rush. He understood that acting too soon would cost him clarity. Instead, he let the truth settle deeper, letting it shape his next steps. He wasn't driven by rage anymore. He was driven by purpose. Late one night, unable to sleep, Ethan stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He realized something important in that moment. The betrayal hadn't just taken his trust. It had taken his sense of safety. The world no longer felt predictable. And that loss demanded an answer. By the end of the week, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He would not remain a passive part of someone else's story. Whether through confrontation, exposure, or walking away on his own terms, he would regain control. The betrayal had started quietly, but its consequences would not fade so easily. This was only the beginning. After the shock of betrayal had settled into a quiet, burning awareness, Ethan moved through his days as if he were both present and absent at the same time. At work, at home, even with friends, he became an observer of his own life. Every interaction felt layered with meaning he hadn't noticed before. Small gestures that had once seemed trivial now carried weight. The way someone laughed a little too loudly. It's the way a phone would light up and be quickly hidden. It's the way a glance lingered a moment longer than necessary. Ethan noticed it all. Each detail reinforced the truth he had uncovered, confirming that this was no accident or misunderstanding. This knowledge, while painful, gave him clarity. And clarity became a tool he learned to wield. Ethan didn't speak to anyone about what had happened. Confiding in friends or family could complicate matters. Gossip could distort facts. He needed to think clearly, plan carefully, and keep the situation under his control. He wasn't thinking about revenge in the childish sense of punishment or retaliation. He was thinking about balance. He wanted the truth recognized, not buried under excuses or illusions. He wanted the person who had hurt him to feel the consequences of their choices in a way that matched the depth of what they had done. He began with observation. He recorded small patterns, times when messages appeared, the way conversations shifted when he entered a room, the subtle changes in tone that betrayed emotion. Each day he wrote down what he noticed, as if compiling evidence for a trial he hadn't yet scheduled. Every note was precise, unemotional, and factual. Ethan didn't allow his imagination to exaggerate what had happened. He documented reality, leaving room for interpretation later. This discipline kept him grounded. Reminded him that he wasn't acting on impulse or anger, but strategy. Ethan also began imagining outcomes. He pictured what could happen if he confronted the person immediately. The accusations, the denials, the emotional chaos. Considered indirect approaches, subtle hints, questions designed to test their reaction, ways to make them aware that he knew without ever saying a word. Every scenario carried risk. Every choice carried consequence. And yet, the planning process itself gave Ethan a sense of control that had been absent since the betrayal occurred. For the first time in weeks, he felt a measure of calm. Nights became the most difficult. Alone in his apartment, Ethan's mind replayed the message over and over. He imagined conversations that might happen, rehearsed words he could use, tested tones that could convey authority without losing dignity. Sometimes he imagined a confrontation that exposed everything at once. In those moments, he felt a flicker of satisfaction, imagining the shock and realization on the other person's face. Other times, he pictured a quiet reveal where facts were presented calmly with no spectacle, letting the truth speak for itself. Both approaches tempted him, but each left him with questions. Which path would preserve his own sense of self? Which path would truly restore balance? Ethan wrestled with his emotions constantly. Anger surfaced and subsided, replaced by hurt, replaced by a cold, analytical focus, replaced by uncertainty. He realized that revenge wasn't just about making the other person feel pain. It was about defining himself in response to what had been done. He had to decide who he wanted to be in the aftermath, a person consumed by anger, or someone who took decisive, controlled action that maintained his dignity. That internal struggle became a daily battle. He also considered the person who betrayed him as more than an antagonist. He tried to understand their motives, to see the situation from their perspective. It didn't excuse the behavior, but it provided insight. They had believed, or at least told themselves, that their actions were justified. That understanding added complexity to Ethan's planning. He knew that exposing the betrayal could shatter their life, but that was not his primary goal. His goal was clarity, recognition of truth, and personal closure. This distinction prevented him from crossing lines he might regret. The planning took a practical turn as well. Ethan organized evidence carefully. Messages, notes, receipts, anything that confirmed what had occurred. He stored them in a private, secure place, ensuring that when the time came, he could reference facts without relying on memory or hearsay. This careful preparation gave him confidence. The betrayal had left him feeling powerless initially, but now, for the first time, he felt capable of taking deliberate action. As days passed, Ethan began testing reactions subtly. He asked questions that seemed casual, watched for hesitation, observed how the person shifted when the topic came close to their secret. He noted patterns in their behavior, small tells that indicated awareness, guilt, or overconfidence. These observations became part of his mental map, guiding his eventual decision. He wasn't probing for revenge yet. He was gathering understanding, patience shaping itself into strategy. Simultaneously, Ethan's own moral compass tugged at him. He wanted justice, but he didn't want to become cruel. Considered the possibility that acting too harshly could damage him as much as the other person. He reflected on stories he had heard, people consumed by the desire for payback, only to find their own lives filled with bitterness afterward. He asked himself if satisfying the urge for revenge was worth losing peace of mind, or if a measured approach could provide closure without destroying everything in its path. These reflections slowed him down, but also refined his approach, giving him clarity of intention. He also noticed changes in himself. He was quieter, more focused, more deliberate. He no longer reacted immediately to small frustrations. He measured words and actions, observing rather than participating. His relationships outside the betrayal were influenced by this new mindset. He was careful to maintain normalcy, even while planning what could happen in private. Friends commented that he seemed more thoughtful, introspective, and even sharper. Little did they know that his calm exterior masked a storm of planning and anticipation. Ethan began to understand that revenge was not a single action, but a process. It was a journey of observation, preparation, and self-reflection. It required patience, timing, and a strong sense of purpose. Acting too soon could backfire. Acting too late could leave the opportunity wasted. He learned that the desire for vengeance could sharpen the mind if channeled correctly, but it could also consume the spirit if allowed to dictate impulsive behavior. The turning point in this phase of planning came unexpectedly. Ethan observed the subtle ways the person who betrayed him justified their actions. The little signs of guilt mixed with rationalization. They didn't see their behavior as harmful. In their mind, it was necessity, survival, even self-preservation. That insight changed Ethan's perspective. he realized that his own satisfaction would not come from shaming or humiliating them. It would come from reclaiming his power, defining boundaries, and asserting his understanding of the truth. Revenge was no longer a matter of payback, was a matter of equilibrium. Days stretched into weeks, and the tension built steadily. Ethan found himself imagining the moment when the truth could no longer be hidden. He pictured it carefully, the timing, the words, the environment. Yet he didn't rush toward it. He knew that the right moment required both courage and restraint. He could see the clarity and the moral high ground that patience offered. And he was determined not to squander it with hasty action. During this period, Ethan's emotions were a complex blend. Frustration mixed with anticipation. Hurt mixed with determination. Anger mixed with empathy. Each day he felt stronger, more capable of managing the chaos of betrayal. He understood that planning revenge was not just about the other person, it was also about mastering his own response. Ensuring that whatever happened next was deliberate and conscious. Ethan also considered the possible fallout. He imagined family, friends, and colleagues witnessing the truth, reacting in ways he couldn't predict. He realized that even careful action carried risk. The consequences could extend beyond the two of them, impacting people who weren't involved. That knowledge made him even more careful. His planning had to be precise, responsible, and morally grounded. He refused to act recklessly, no matter how intense the desire for retaliation grew. Weeks of careful planning and observation had led Ethan to this moment, the quiet tension of anticipation pressing down on him like a weight. Every small detail he had noticed, every subtle reaction he had documented, and every mental rehearsal of possible outcomes converged here. The room was dimly lit, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible over the thumping of his own heartbeat. Across from him sat the person who had betrayed him, unaware of the storm of awareness and preparation that Ethan carried with him. They spoke casually, laughing at something trivial, oblivious that every word, every gesture was being measured. Ethan remained calm on the outside, but inside 1,000 thoughts raced. The desire for revenge pulsed through him, a quiet, persistent force. He could expose everything in an instant, shattering the carefully constructed life the other person had built around their secret. The temptation was real, vivid, and intoxicating. He imagined the look on their face, the moment recognition and guilt collided, and a flicker of satisfaction surged in him at the thought. But alongside it, a deeper question pressed in. Would this act truly restore him, or would it create a hollow victory, leaving him empty and bitter? He remembered the nights of reflection, the hours spent analyzing his own motivations. Revenge was tempting because it promised closure, but Ethan had learned that it could also trap a person in cycles of anger and regret. He weighed the options carefully. He could act now, release the weight he had carried, and assert his power. Or he could choose restraint, preserve his dignity, and confront the situation in a controlled, morally grounded way. Each path carried risk. Each path carried consequence. He had to choose wisely. The person across from him laughed again, the sound casual but warm. They had no idea that Ethan had seen the truth, no idea that the quiet observations, the detailed notes, and the mental rehearsals had all been for this moment. They still believed they could explain everything if the need arose, still believed that the past could remain hidden. The contrast between their innocence and his awareness sharpened Ethan's resolve. He could see the consequences of his choices unfolding in real time, and he understood that power lay not just in action, but in timing, intention, and control. Ethan's eyes met theirs, calm, steady, yet probing. He spoke first, not with accusation, not with anger, but with clarity. "I know what's been happening," he said quietly. The words landed like stones in still water. They did not scream. They did not shout. They did not humiliate. Yet they carried weight, undeniable and precise. For the first time, the other person realized that their secret had been uncovered. Their smile faltered, and for a brief moment, fear and recognition flickered in their eyes. Ethan continued, carefully choosing each phrase. He named the betrayal, referenced the patterns, the moments, and the hidden actions, but he did so without cruelty. He did not embellish. He did not twist facts for effect. He presented the truth calmly, logically, and clearly. This approach created a quiet but powerful shift in the room. The energy changed from casual familiarity to tense acknowledgement. The weight of truth was enough. He did not need spectacle, drama, or revenge. He only needed the facts and the presence of moral clarity. As he spoke, Ethan observed reactions closely. The person who had betrayed him wavered between guilt, defensiveness, and regret. Their explanations began, tentative and shaky, lacking the confidence they once held. Every word they spoke reinforced Ethan's position. The truth was undeniable. The evidence clear and the moral balance shifting. Yet even as he listened, Ethan felt no joy in their discomfort. He felt a steady, measured satisfaction rooted in integrity rather than malice. The rush of vengeance, the fleeting thrill that had tempted him for weeks, was not necessary here. He realized that power could exist in control, in restraint, and in the deliberate, thoughtful exercise of truth. The tension reached its peak when the other person pleaded. Not for forgiveness, but for understanding. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," they said quietly. "I only did what I thought I had to do." Ethan felt the weight of these words, the mixture of justification and remorse. He knew their reasoning, their attempts to rationalize, and he acknowledged them internally. But he also knew that rationalization did not erase betrayal, did not undo the harm, and did not restore trust. The moment demanded a decision to respond with measured consequences or to unleash the full force of the retribution he had once imagined. Ethan chose neither vengeance nor fury. Instead, he established boundaries. He spoke calmly about the need for honesty, respect, and accountability moving forward. He made it clear that trust, once broken, required deliberate effort to rebuild, and that certain actions had lasting consequences. He did not humiliate, he did not punish, he did not escalate. Yet the clarity, the control, the unwavering presence of truth were enough to assert authority and reclaim power. The other person listened, slowly comprehending the weight of the words. Their demeanor shifted from casual defense to somber acknowledgement. They realized that the quiet, controlled exposure of truth was more impactful than any dramatic spectacle could have been. Their mistakes were clear, and the responsibility for them was undeniable. Ethan's choice demonstrated strength, balance, and moral authority, stark contrast to the impulsive, reactive vengeance he had once imagined. After the conversation ended, Ethan walked away. He left the room not with triumph or bitterness, but with a sense of control and clarity. The burden of betrayal remained, but it no longer dominated him. He had reclaimed agency, chosen integrity over impulsive action, and confronted the situation on his own terms. The process had been challenging, tense, and emotionally draining, yet it left him in a position of strength rather than chaos. In the days that followed, Ethan reflected on the experience. He noticed how the choice to act with intention rather than impulse affected him. He slept more peacefully, engaged with others more thoughtfully, and observed life with a steadier perspective. The desire for revenge had been a powerful motivator, but it was no longer necessary. The careful, measured confrontation had provided clarity, acknowledgement, and moral resolution without the destruction that vengeance often brings. He also observed the other person's response over time. They began to act with greater awareness, understanding the consequences of their actions and making subtle adjustments in behavior. They did not seek approval, nor did they attempt to manipulate. But the recognition of accountability shaped their choices moving forward. The outcome was not one of humiliation or punishment, but of balance. A lesson in integrity that extended beyond the immediate conflict. Ethan realized that revenge, in its simplest form, is a pursuit of balance. But it often distorts character and perpetuates cycles of pain when pursued recklessly. His approach demonstrated that strength lies not in destruction, but in measured action, moral clarity, and the courage to confront reality without resorting to cruelty. The climax of his journey was not the exposure of betrayal itself, but the conscious choice to act thoughtfully, to assert boundaries, and to reclaim agency without allowing bitterness to define his life. In retrospect, the entire arc of betrayal, observation, planning, and confrontation revealed deep truths about human behavior, morality, and personal resilience. Ethan learned that power resides not in the ability to harm others, but in the ability to maintain control over one's own actions, to navigate emotional complexity, and to choose responses that align with personal values. The climax of his journey was a demonstration of emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and moral courage. Ethan's story did not end with vengeance, satisfaction, or spectacle. It ended with understanding, agency, and a nuanced awareness of human imperfection. The betrayal had forced him into a position of confrontation, but his choice transformed potential chaos into clarity. He emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of navigating future challenges. The lessons of patience, observation, and moral reflection were far more valuable than any fleeting moment of retribution could have been.